Hello, it's me, Chuck, and this is your daily devotion for Holy Tuesday, 2025. As I had mentioned yesterday, I plan to provide daily devotions inspired by moments that we can read that took place during this week within the Gospel of Luke. So without further ado, let's turn our attentions to Luke chapter 20, verses 20 through 26. Hear these words. Keeping a close watch on him, they sent spies who pretended to be honest. They hoped to catch Jesus in something he said so that they might hand him over to the power and authority of the governor. So the spies questioned him. Teacher, we know that you speak and teach what is right, and that you do not show partiality, but teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. Tell us then, is it right for us to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Christ saw through their duplicity and said to them, Show me a denarius. Whose portrait and inscription are on it? Caesar's, they replied. Christ said to them, Then give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. They were unable to trap him in what he had said, and astonished by his answer, they became silent. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. My friends, it's April 15th, and I just could not help myself but share this specific story found in Luke's Gospel on this day. Because it is tax day after all, and it just so happened that this particular story happens to take place during Holy Week, and tax day falls on Holy Week this year. I mean, after all, wasn't it Margaret Mitchell, the great novelist known for books like Gone with the Wind and so forth? She once was quoted saying, death, taxes, and childbirth. There's never any convenient time for any of them. And likewise, it seems like the conversation that we just heard about in our gospel story for today, at least two of these three are taking place in our story today. I mean, the audacity of the Pharisees sending, quote, spies to mix in with the crowd and openly flatter Jesus and ask a sort of loaded trick question, if you will, so they could possibly trap him or get him to say something that could justify their desires to have him taken out of the picture. It definitely speaks volumes as to how far they're willing to go just to get what they want, simply because, well, public opinion up to this point has kept them from stopping Jesus. On many other occasions, their efforts made them look, well, embarrassingly foolish, if not downright insensitive, if not heartless in the eyes of many. Whether it be those times they criticized Jesus for healing people, let alone helping people who needed help on the Sabbath, to pointing out, how what he thinks is wrong while they themselves express themselves in superficial, if not corrupt ways of displaying faith, to even that moment when Christ caused all that commotion at the temple earlier that week, and they did nothing to stop him. You see, they have lost so much authority in the eyes of many. So to have this sort of trick question, if you will, that could possibly turn the tide of public opinion seemed to be now their strategy. And the question was a good one. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Because you see, if Christ had said taxes should be paid, he could then be accused of denying the sovereignty of God over Israel, making his popularity come down more than just a notch or two with the eyes of many. But had he said taxes should not be paid, he would have just made himself an enemy of Rome, and they could have him legitimately arrested. Of course, Christ knew their intentions, saw right through this plot, simply asked to see a coin and asked whose picture was on it. And this wasn't any sort of trick question or anything, but a simple one. Whose image and inscription is on it? So they provided the obvious answer, and Christ responded, Then give back to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Give back to God what is God's. You see, essentially, Jesus more or less was implying that, if you're willing to use that coin, whether it be for taxes or just spending it in some form or fashion, the bottom line is, if you are using that coin, if you have a willingness to make use of that coin within your day-to-day lives, that means you also must recognize Caesar's civil authority within it. Which also means you're obliged to pay him taxes as well. It's not a question of faith, but a question of civil duty. Doesn't mean you have to like it, but it would have been a legitimate request of the government whose currency you are using to pay taxes. And I would imagine it was true back then as it is now. It is expected of one to be obedient to the government of which one resides. And whether then or now, it did include taxes. However, instead of getting into a conversation that might be a little uncomfortable, let's also not forget that second half of Christ's answer. We're also responsible to give unto God things that are God's. And what do you think would be a legitimate request that would be from God, especially here and now on this tax day of 2025? Perhaps the request would be to love one another, to do unto others. Meaning, yes, taxes unfortunately are expected of us. However, unlike taxes, as we live our lives in faith, having faith and sharing our faith is not something expected, but something desired from God. And let me ask the heartfelt question I think we all need to consider on this Lord's Day, especially as we continue together on our journey to Easter morning. As we live our lives, what are the things we truly embrace and appreciate the most in life? Are they the things we do out of obligation or the things we do out of desire? Likewise, when we do things out of faith, how much more meaningful could it be if the faith you share is done not out of obligation, but simply out of desire? Just a thought. I thank you for joining me today as we continue this journey to Easter together as a family of faith.